Mason Fuller hadn't planned on throwing a punch that Tuesday morning, but the second he saw the guy grab her arm, instincts took over. "Hey!" Mason shouted, his boots pounding the sidewalk as he crossed the parking lot of the grocery store, his 6-year-old son tucked safely in the backseat of his beat-up pickup. The man had a tight grip on the woman's arm, his voice sharp and angry. She was trying to pull away, clearly uncomfortable. "I said let go of her," Mason barked, stepping between them. The man turned, annoyed. "Mind your business," he didn't get to finish. Mason's fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling back. The man cursed and scrambled off, throwing one last glare before disappearing behind a row of cars. The woman stared, wide-eyed, her chest rising and falling. Thank you," Mason rubbed his knuckles. "You okay?" she nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, he wouldn't stop yelling. I told him I didn't know him, but he kept insisting I owed him a drink or something." Mason glanced at her elegant coat, heels too fancy for this part of town, lips still trembling. "You sure you're all right?" "I am now." She smiled, and something about it made his heart jolt. "I'm Noel." "Mason," he replied. "You sure you don't want to call the cops?" "No, it's fine, I just want to get out of here, but thank you. Really." She hesitated, then added, "Can I buy you a coffee? I mean, you did save me from a potential nightmare." He glanced toward his truck. "I've got my son with me. Probably not the best time." Her eyes softened. "Oh, of course. Rain check?" he offered, half teasing. She smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. "Definitely." He watched her get into a sleek black car with tinted windows. It purred as it rolled away, definitely not a local's ride. Mason shook his head and climbed back into his truck, where little Milo was swinging his legs in the backseat. "Daddy, did you punch that man?" Milo asked, eyes wide. "Yeah, buddy." "But only because he was scaring that lady." Milo thought for a second. "Did you save her like a superhero?" Mason chuckled. "Something like that." Noel Bennett couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd stepped in without a second thought. Back at her office, a glass tower in downtown Los Angeles, she sat behind her desk, trying to focus on quarterly reports. But Mason's voice, his calm strength, kept pulling her attention away. Her assistant, Carla, peeked in. "You okay, miss?" "Bennett?" "Yeah," Noel said, even though her heart was still pounding. "Just had a weird morning." Carla raised a brow. "That's rare." Noel didn't mention the parking lot. No one here knew about that side of her life. Not the dangers of running a billion-dollar real estate company. Not the creeps who thought a woman in power was fair game. And definitely not the stranger who'd stepped in like a modern-day knight without knowing who she was. She'd Googled his name, Mason Fuller. Nothing came up except a few listings for a small carpentry business out of Pasadena. No website. Just a phone number and a picture of custom woodwork. She didn't care about that. What got her was the way he looked at her, not like a CEO, not like someone he wanted something from. Just a person, a woman who needed help. Mason didn't expect to see her again. He figured she was one of those rich types passing through. But 3 days later, as he wrapped up a job building shelves for a neighborhood library, she showed up. Literally. A sleek black car pulled up as he loaded tools into the back of his truck. She stepped out, in jeans and a pale blue blouse this time, her hair loose. "Noel," he asked, stunned. "I owed you a coffee," she said, holding up 2 cups. "Thought I'd find you," he blinked. "How'd you know where I'd be?" I asked around. "You're not easy to Google," he chuckled. Not much of an online presence. Figured that out. She handed him a cup. "Hope you like it black." "I do, thanks." He took a sip. "So why'd you really come?" She hesitated. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you." He looked at her, trying to make sense of it. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You stepped in when no one else did. You didn't hesitate. That says a lot." He was quiet for a second. "Most people would have done the same." "No," she said softly. "They wouldn't." Mason glanced at her car, the way she carried herself, confident, composed, like someone used to being in control. "You don't look like someone who needs saving. Everyone needs saving sometimes." There was something in her voice then, something honest. vulnerable. Mason wanted to ask more, but Milo's voice rang out from inside the library. "Daddy, I found a dinosaur book." Noel's eyes lit up. "That your son?" "Yeah," Mason said. "Milo." She followed him inside, watching as Milo proudly held up a picture book. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Noel." Milo grinned. "You're pretty," Mason groaned. "Milo," Noel laughed. "It's okay, he's honest." Milo beamed. "Want to see my dinosaur drawing?" They sat at a tiny table while Milo showed her his art. Mason watched her, how she listened, how she asked questions, how she didn't flinch when Milo accidentally smeared crayon on her sleeve. Afterwards, as they walked out together, Noel turned to Mason. "He's amazing. He's my whole world." She glanced at Mason, then reached into her purse, pulling out a small card. "If you ever want to talk or grab dinner, I'd like that." He took the card. It was simple, just her name and a number. He didn't know yet she was one of the most powerful CEOs in Los Angeles, but he was already falling. And so was she. Neither of them realized it yet, but everything was about to change. The next time Mason saw Noel, she was standing outside his workshop just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting golden light across the gravel lot. She wore dark slacks and a cream blouse tucked neatly at her waist, the sleeves rolled to her elbows like she was ready to work. The sight made him pause mid-step, a coil of surprise tightening in his chest. "I figured I'd stop by and see the place," she said, brushing a hand through her hair as if unsure whether she was intruding. "I hope that's okay." He shifted the blueprint tube under his arm and nodded. "Yeah. Just didn't expect you out here. Not exactly central." Her gaze moved across the partially finished wooden deck stretching behind the building. "I like seeing how things are made. There's something honest about it." Mason unlocked the door and held it open. "Well, then you're in the right place. Watch your step, there's sawdust everywhere." Inside, the scent of cedar and varnish clung to the air. Tools hung on the walls in neat rows, and a half-sanded oak dresser sat under a single fluorescent light. Noel walked slowly, fingertips grazing one of the polished edges. "You built all of this?" she asked, turning toward him. "Most of it. Some things were passed down from my father, but I've added to it over the years." She studied the space, then said quietly, "You built something lasting, that's rare." He gave a short laugh. "Hard to tell sometimes. Feels like I'm just keeping the lights on most days." Her eyes found his. "That's still more than most people manage." Mason leaned against the workbench and set the blueprint tube beside him. "Not sure what kind of CEOs drop by carpentry shops after hours." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You figured it out." "I didn't have to. A neighbor of mine volunteers at the library, said you were on some magazine cover last year for buying up half of downtown." She tilted her head. And I guess I'm wondering why someone like you is interested in someone like me." Noel walked toward a stool and sat, folding her hands over her knee. "Because you didn't look at me like a headline. And because I'm tired of rooms filled with people who only see what they can take." Mason crossed his arms. "So what do you see here?" "I see someone who hasn't forgotten how to live with both feet on the ground." He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, taut but not uncomfortable. "You should know something," he said finally. "I don't have much, just this shop, my son, and a lot of late nights trying to make everything work." "I'm not here to be rescued," she said, her voice calm. "I don't need more things. I want something real." He looked at her for a long moment. "You hungry?" A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Starving." They ended up at a family-owned diner 3 blocks from the shop. Mason greeted the woman behind the counter by name, and she led them to a booth near the back without needing to ask for his order. Noel took in the cracked vinyl seats, the laminated menus, the couple in their 60s sharing a milkshake 2 tables over. "This place has charm," she said. "They serve the best chili fries in the county. That's what counts." He didn't expect her to actually eat them, but when the plate arrived, she picked up a fry and popped it into her mouth without hesitation. "So, how long have you had the shop?" she asked between bites. "Almost 12 years. Took it over after my dad passed. Wasn't exactly the plan, but life had other ideas. Noel's expression shifted. You didn't want to be a carpenter? I wanted to be a photographer. Travel, shoot landscapes, maybe work for one of those nature magazines. Then Milo came along, and suddenly the road didn't look so open anymore. She nodded slowly. I understand more than you think. He leaned forward. Do you? My parents died when I was 19. I had 3 younger siblings. I dropped out of college and started flipping foreclosed houses with borrowed money. By the time I turned 25, I was running my own real estate group. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to keep the lights on. He exhaled. That's a hell of a story. I don't tell it often. Why now? Because I don't feel like I have to pretend around you. The weight of that admission hung between them, and Mason didn't know what to say. So he let the silence speak for him, let it fill the space with something solid and warm. After dinner, he walked her to her car. The street was quiet, the wind cool against their faces. She paused before getting in. Would you ever consider coming to one of my events? He raised a brow. What kind of event? There's a charity gala this weekend. Black tie. Loud music, overpriced champagne. Not exactly your scene, I know. That obvious? She laughed softly. You'd hate it. Then why ask? Because I'd like to see what it feels like to have someone there who's not playing a part. He studied her. You want me to pretend to be your date. I want you to be my date. That's unexpected. So was you throwing a punch for me in a parking lot. He glanced toward his truck, then back at her. I'd have to find someone to watch Milo. I can help with that. I have a retired executive chef who now runs a private nanny placement service. She swears by her staff, I'll cover the cost. He shook his head. I don't take handouts. It's not a handout. It's an invitation. Mason didn't answer right away, but something in her eyes, earnest, unwavering, made him nod once. I'll think about it. She stepped closer, her voice low. Do more than think. The engine purred to life as she slid into the driver's seat. He watched her go, the taillights glowing red until they turned the corner and disappeared. Back at home, Milo was already asleep, curled under a blanket with a plastic dinosaur tucked in beside him. Mason stood by the doorway, arms crossed, heart still unsteady. He didn't know what he was stepping into, but for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. Mason stood in front of the full-length mirror in his bedroom, tugging at the stiff collar of the rented tuxedo as if it were a noose. The bow tie looked like it belonged in someone else's life, not his. Beside him on the bed, Milo was sitting cross-legged, holding a plastic comb and watching his dad with the scrutiny of a tiny general. You look like James Bond, Milo said, tilting his head. But older. Mason gave him a dry look. Thanks, bud. You need better hair, Milo added thoughtfully. I'll take that under advisement. A knock came at the front door before Mason could respond. He glanced at the clock, still 30 minutes before they were supposed to leave. He opened the door to find an older woman with silver curls and a sensible skirt suit standing patiently on the porch. Good evening, she said. I'm Lorraine. Miss Bennett sent me. Mason blinked. You're the nanny. I prefer child care specialist, but yes. Milo came barreling across the living room. You brought snacks, Lorraine smiled. I brought a board game collection and a recipe for blueberry muffins. We'll see which one wins. Mason hesitated, but the woman radiated competence like a retired general turned preschool teacher. He crouched in front of Milo. You good with Miss Lorraine while I'm gone? Milo nodded solemnly. Can we have pancakes for dinner? Lorraine placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll negotiate. Mason grabbed his keys, gave Milo a quick hug, and walked out into the night, heart thudding harder with each step. The car waiting for him at the curb wasn't just a car. It was a sleek, midnight blue vehicle with a driver in a crisp black suit, holding the door open like Mason was royalty. He slid into the back seat, feeling like a misplaced extra in a movie set he didn't audition for. When he arrived at the venue, the building loomed like a palace, glass and steel glowing under soft, golden lighting, with a red carpet stretching across the entrance. Cameramen flashed their bulbs as couples in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos stepped out of luxury cars. Noel was waiting just past the entrance, dressed in a floor-length silver gown that shimmered as she moved. Her hair was swept up, her earrings catching the light like stars. She looked like she belonged in a world that ran on champagne and exclusivity. "Wow," Mason said, coming to a stop. "You look." Noel glanced up at him, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Nervous. Like I just walked into a dream I don't belong in. Maybe you're the only real thing in it." They entered the ballroom together, the air humming with the sounds of clinking glasses and the soft trill of a live string quartet. Waiters in white gloves moved like dancers, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres Mason couldn't pronounce. He kept close to Noel, unsure where to look without revealing how out of place he felt. He leaned in toward her. "Are these shrimp supposed to be raw?" "SHH," she said, biting back a laugh. "Don't insult the tartare." A group of sharply dressed men and women approached, their gazes flickering between the two with polite curiosity. "Noel," one of the men said, his polished smile stretching too wide. "We were beginning to think you'd be flying solo again." "Not tonight," she replied casually. "Mason, this is Nathan, Alicia, and Priya, old colleagues." Nathan studied Mason with the faintest trace of condescension. "You in real estate too?" "I build things," Mason said simply. "With my hands." "Ah," Nathan replied, clearly unsure how to respond. "That's refreshing." Mason didn't miss the undertone, and neither did Noel. She slipped her arm through his and turned her gaze on Nathan. "Mason's work is some of the best I've seen. Precision, patience, craftsmanship." "You remember those qualities, don't you, Nathan?" Nathan's smirk faded. "Of course." As the group drifted away, Mason leaned closer. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said. "Besides, it's fun watching them squirm." They moved toward the balcony, away from the press of bodies and endless chatter. The city stretched below them, glittering and cold. Mason exhaled slowly. "This is your life," he said. "It's a part of it," she admitted. "But it's not the whole story." He turned to her, searching her face. "So what is?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. "The part no one sees, the part that wants something simple, honest, like this." He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at her said everything. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded, and there was only the quiet between them. Then a voice called out behind them. "Noel, we need you for the board photo." She sighed. "Of course." As she turned to go, Mason caught her hand. "Wait." She looked back at him, her face unreadable. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but it's starting to feel like something I don't want to lose." Her fingers tightened around his. "Then don't." Later that night, long after the speeches and the auctions and the endless small talk, Mason walked her to her car. They stood close beneath the soft glow of a nearby street lamp, the air between them thick with something unspoken. "I didn't think I'd fit in tonight," he said. "You didn't," she replied, stepping closer. "You stood out, in the best way." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, heart pounding. "You sure about this?" "I haven't been sure of anything in a long time," she whispered. "But I'm sure of you." And then she kissed him, not like someone playing a part, but like someone who'd finally found what they didn't know they'd been searching for. Mason stood in the middle of his workshop, elbow deep in fresh cedar shavings, when the call came. "Hi," Noel said as soon as he answered. Her voice was tight, clipped. "I need to ask you something, and I know it's a lot, but can you be at the Langham Hotel ballroom in 2 hours? He wiped his hands on a rag. "You okay?" "I will be if you say yes." He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." Lorraine agreed to stay later with Milo. Mason changed in the back office of the shop, pulling on the same tuxedo he hadn't returned yet. He arrived just as the sky dimmed to a smoky purple. The Langham's grand entrance was flanked with gold-lit fountains and sleek black cars pulling up in succession. Inside, someone pressed a name tag into his hand, but he didn't stop to read it. He found Noel in a corner behind a curtain wall, pacing. "What's going on?" Mason asked. She turned sharply. I didn't want to tell you over the phone. My board is voting tonight on a merger I don't want. It'll gut the entire community housing initiative. I've been fighting them for weeks, but they think I've lost perspective, that I'm too emotionally attached. His eyes searched hers. And you want me here because they think I'm living in a bubble. They think I don't understand real people anymore. But if they see you, if they hear what we talked about, what you believe in, they'll listen. You don't have to lie, just be yourself. He exhaled slowly. You trust me with this, with everything. Mason stepped onto the stage 10 minutes later, introduced by name and nothing else. He stood behind the podium, the glare of the chandeliers bouncing off polished floors and skeptical faces. He cleared his throat. I'm not a businessman, he began. And I don't belong in rooms like this, but I know what it means to worry about keeping the lights on. I know what it's like to raise a kid alone and wish there were more places in this city that didn't feel like they were built to keep people out. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph, an old one of a 3-bedroom home he'd built last year for a family displaced by a fire. Noel's company helped fund this rebuild, he said. She didn't tell anyone. There wasn't a press release, but I saw what it meant to that family. A father with a missing leg, a daughter who still sleeps with the lights on. What she's fighting for tonight, it's not numbers on a spreadsheet. It's people, it's dignity. When he stepped down, the room was silent, not cold, just stunned. Then the chairman rose and said, "We'll reconvene in 10 minutes. Noel found Mason backstage. I don't know what you just did, she said, her voice trembling, but I think it worked. He ran a hand over his jaw. You didn't need me to speak. You could have done that yourself. I didn't need you to fix it, she said. I needed you beside me. He looked at her for a long moment. Is that what this is now? You and me? I hope so. She reached for him, fingers brushing his. Come with me. They slipped out a side door, leaving the boardroom behind. She led him through the garden behind the hotel, past fountains and flowering hedges until they reached the edge of a private patio strung with soft amber lights. I used to come here as a kid, she said. My parents brought us once a year. It always felt like magic. He stayed quiet, watching her. I've spent so long in rooms where everything felt transactional, every smile, every compliment, every relationship. But then you showed up, and suddenly, none of it felt real unless you were in it. He stepped closer. I don't have much to offer, Noel, just me. Milo. Some wood and glue. That's everything I want. She leaned into him, and this kiss wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was quiet, honest, meant to last. When she pulled back, he kept his forehead resting against hers. So what now? He asked. I bought a plot of land in Echo Park, she said. It's for a community rec center. I want you to design it, build it. His eyebrows lifted. Seriously? You said you wanted to build things that last. So do I. He folded her into his arms. You sure you're ready for a life that includes glue-covered jeans and pancakes for dinner? I'm counting on it. They returned to the boardroom hand in hand. The chairman announced the merger was off the table. The housing initiative would remain intact. There was applause, some polite, some genuine, but Mason only heard the sound of Noel's breath beside him. 2 weeks later, they stood beneath the early morning sun while Mason unlocked the door to his workshop. Noel wore ripped jeans and a paint-streaked sweatshirt, holding 2 coffees and a blueprint tube under her arm. Milo came running from inside, waving a drawing of a treehouse. Can we build this next? He asked. Mason looked at Noel. What do you think, partner? She smiled. Let's get to work. Mason adjusted the strap of the toolbox over his shoulder as he stepped through the glass doors of the newly leased space in Echo Park. The site was still bare concrete and exposed beams, but the sun poured in through the tall windows, catching on the dust in the air like glitter. It smelled like opportunity, raw wood, fresh paint, and the first breath of something new. Noel stood at the far end of the room, holding a rolled-up set of architectural renderings in one hand and a measuring tape in the other. She wore sneakers, her hair pulled into a messy knot, and a look of absolute focus on her face as she marked something on the floor in chalk. You're an hour early, she said without looking up. You're 3 hours too into it, Mason replied. Have you even had coffee? There's a thermos in the corner. It's probably lukewarm. He set down the toolbox and walked over, lifting the thermos. You've been here since sunrise. I couldn't sleep, she said, straightening. I kept thinking about how to fit the reading alcove without losing the window view. He uncapped the thermos and offered it to her. We'll figure it out. You don't have to solve it all before breakfast. She sipped, then winced. That's not coffee anymore, that's regret in liquid form. He chuckled, stepping beside her to study the chalk lines. You know, you could have left this part to me. I like being involved, she said softly. I like knowing what's under the surface, how it all fits together. He glanced at her, then down at the floor plan. You want to move this wall? If we swing it out by 2 feet, we can add storage without blocking the light. He crouched to get a better view. You've been holding out on me. You're pretty good at this. She crouched beside him. I was going to minor in design once upon a time, before everything changed. You miss it. Sometimes, but now I get to build something that matters with you. They were only inches apart. He could feel the warmth of her against his side, the steady rhythm of her breath. She looked at him with an openness that still caught him off guard, like she wasn't afraid to show what she felt anymore. I didn't think I'd ever want this kind of life, she said quietly, but I do. I want the late nights and the sawdust. I want the mess and the beauty that comes with starting over. Mason cupped her face gently. You're not starting over, you're building forward. She leaned into his touch. With you, with both feet in. Later that day, they brought Milo to the site for the first time. He wore a tiny hard hat Mason had made from an old bike helmet and held a clipboard like he was running the project himself. Over here is where the snack room goes, Milo announced, pointing to an empty corner. And next to it is the dinosaur book zone. Noel knelt to his height. What if we built a little reading nook shaped like a cave? Milo's eyes widened. With pillows inside? Mason gave her a look of admiration. You're a natural. I just understand how important a good pillow fort is, she replied. They spent the afternoon sketching out plans, measuring spaces, and laughing more than working. When the sun dipped low and Milo began to yawn, Mason scooped him into his arms. Noel gathered the chalk drawings and blueprints, tucking them carefully into a folder. As they left the site, she paused at the threshold and looked back. You ever think about how different things could have been? She asked. I try not to, Mason said. Because this is the only version I want. She reached for his free hand. I love you, he smiled. I love you too. The weeks that followed moved fast. Construction began in earnest. Mason's shop buzzed with activity as volunteers joined the project neighbors, retired tradesmen, even a few of Noel's former board members who wanted to be part of something real. Noel balanced calls with city officials and hands-on work at the site, never missing a beat. One morning, Mason found her sitting in the half-finished reading cave, her laptop open and her brow furrowed. Something wrong? She looked up, then smiled slowly. No, something very right. I just submitted the paperwork to convert one of our downtown properties into transitional housing. It's finally happening. He sat beside her. You did it. We did it. They stayed there for a while, sitting in the quiet shell of what would soon be a sanctuary. Mason laid his hand over hers. You still sure about all this? She leaned into him. I've never been more sure of anything. The grand opening of the community center was held on a clear spring afternoon. The building gleamed, full of life and color. Children ran through the halls, volunteers handed out books and snacks, and a local band played acoustic covers under a string of lights. Mason stood beside Noel, an arm around her waist, watching Milo give a tour to a group of wide-eyed kids. You know, he said, if someone had told me a few months ago that I'd be standing here with you, watching our kid give architectural commentary on a cave-shaped book nook, I'd have laughed in their face. She laughed. He's not wrong, though. That corner beam is slightly crooked. He groaned. I'm never living that down. She turned to face him. You're not supposed to, it's part of the charm. A woman from the city council approached with a camera crew, asking for an official photo. Mason tensed, but Noel squeezed his hand. "Let them see what real looks like," she whispered. He nodded, pulling her close as the flash went off. Later that evening, after the last guest left and the building quieted, they stood in front of the mural painted across the back wall, a sprawling tree with deep roots, each branch etched with the names of donors, volunteers, and families. Milo had insisted one branch say, "Fuller Family." Mason traced the words with his fingertips. This started with a punch in a parking lot. Noel leaned against him. It ended with a home. They locked the doors behind them and walked out under the stars, hand in hand, their future already unfolding with each step forward. At home, Milo was fast asleep, his head buried in a pillow shaped like a triceratops. Mason tucked the blanket around him and kissed his forehead. When he turned, Noel stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing one of his old flannel shirts. She crossed the room and slipped her arms around his waist. "I didn't know peace could feel like this." He kissed the top of her head. "It's not peace. It's love, and it's ours." They stood there in the quiet, wrapped in the warmth of everything they had built together.